We can wait a couple more minutes too, of course. Looks like it's showing up on my side. Hopefully it's working for everybody.
Yep, you're good.
Sweet.
And I will keep an eye on the waiting room as well, and make sure as people are coming in.
Mm-hmm. And Pamela, you let me know when you want me to go ahead and get started. I can wait as long as you need me to.
Yeah, we can wait a couple minutes just to make sure we give everyone enough time to log in, and then I'll just do a quick introduction and then pass it off to you.
Super.
Just real quick, I'm fidgeting, so if that, because it helps me focus, so if that distracts anyone, just let me know.
Not a problem. Okay, I will go ahead and introduce myself and keep admitting people as they start to come in. But welcome everyone, I hope you're enjoying your Tuesday. I haven't been able to go outside, but hopefully you have, since you said it was such a lovely day. My name is Pamela Avila. I'm the coordinator for leadership development and commuter programming at Lindenwood. I work in the student involvement office in Evans, and I help coordinate and put together the leadership series. So if this is your first time, welcome. We're super excited to have you here. And if you participated last year, you may notice things are a little bit different. They are virtual this semester, and we are hosting them every other week as opposed to every week. But we still have a lot of really great presenters this semester and really great topics to cover. So I will go ahead then and, well, really quick, sorry. After the presentation, I do have a quick post test. If you don't mind filling that out. That just helps us get some feedback on the leadership series and can help give us ideas on what other topics would be helpful for us to cover. I did put that link in the chat. If for some reason it's not showing up, let me know and I'll make sure to share that link. But if you could just fill that out after the presentation, that would be very helpful. But I will go ahead and turn it over then to Dr. Julie Turner, who is going to be presenting today.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad to see you guys, although I'm not officially seeing you, but I'm seeing some names that I recognize, which is great. And some new faces, air quoting there too. So I have my screen shared, and so kind of like how we're dealing with in the classroom, right now I won't see your comments. I am going to, on a couple of occasions, ask for you guys to answer questions, and I'm pretty informal. So when I do that, if you want to go ahead and turn off mute and express your thoughts, and then we'll take it from there, but that would be great. So again, I've had a couple of you in class before, you know, when we were actually like meeting in person kind of classes before. So the reason this topic really intrigued me, I was talking to a group of my friends, so people who are older than you guys, about how, you know, small talk is like, why do we even call it small talk? And how really, quite technically, small talk is a very critical skill to learn how to do, especially as we move into networking. And so I thought, gosh, you know, if we struggle as adults already having sort of navigated the faux pas of saying something really inappropriate, like the old adage of, oh gosh, when are you due? And then the person ends up not being pregnant or things like that. So most of the times people who are pretty good at small talk, it's because they have already figured out all the ways that you can really screw this up. So it's important that you guys understand that first. So I thought we would address this. Quite frankly, I'm not going to talk about small talk that's more in social contexts. I'm going to try to address small talk that would be something that you would deal with if you went to a networking event, an information session that deals with employers. So a little bit more on the professional side is how I'm going to go ahead and address this. All right, so before we do this, took a little line from the King and I wanted to get to know you, and I'm only going to ask a couple of these because I want to make sure that we have more time for the information. And then what I'm going to do is, once you feel a little bit more comfortable with me, I might go back and ask a couple of those questions. But I'm going to pull up a couple of different slides, and I just want somebody to throw out their thoughts. And again, it's just a way for me to feel like I'm not just talking to a screen. So I'm going to start this one. So if you could design a t-shirt, actually that's what I was working on before I had you guys get on here. What would you draw or write on it? So whoever feels comfortable answering this question, just throw your answer out there. If you could design a t-shirt and it would represent you, what would be on it? Any takers at all?
I'll go.
Awesome, do it.
Well, I'm a band kid, love band. So I'd have like a staff and like a treble clef, music notes flying everywhere. So that would be.
You know, I couldn't completely hear you. Let's. You want to give that? Just say that one part a little bit again.
Yeah, I'm a band kid. I love bands. So I would probably have like a staff and a treble clef and music notes flying everywhere. So that's
okay,
my kind of thing.
You need to make that happen. I want to see that. Whenever I can actually see you again at some point, you need to come over to Harmon. All right, sweet. I'm going to answer a couple. I'm going to move ahead a little bit. Oh, I love this one. And then we're going to move on to the actual content. So if you had to completely change how we currently celebrate birthdays, and what would you change? And again, this is more of the US culture. How we celebrate birthdays. Anything that you might do to change it?
Maybe change it so that no one gives gifts.
That no one, oh, you like the idea?
Yeah.
It'd be cheaper that way, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Are there any of you guys who, I know I was one that had their birthday during COVID, where you one tradition I think is really fun that would be fun to see continue are these parade things. So my birthday was back in May. I'm not going to tell you how old I am because that definitely is not a small talk conversation starter. But, you know, so as, you know, we couldn't, my group of friends and I, we couldn't go out per se. You know, a lot of the restaurants were still very concerned about being open. And so what was really cute is that a group of my friends just kept dropping by and randomly hanging things on my door during that day and honking and doing these like parades. And I thought that was such a blast. Like I almost just hope that that tradition continues. I think that would be really fun. Anyone else have your birthday during COVID and you had something similar, or you maybe organized something along those lines of just parading or coming by randomly someone's house? Nope. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into the topic. So what is small talk? Okay, the reason we call it small talk is we tend to think it's not something that's very formal or official. And I'm gonna go ahead and minimize you guys so that I can see my stuff. Okay, so it is more of a casual form of conversation. It's really intended to break the ice. And it feels sort of that awkward silence between people. And I'm not sure about those of us who are on this call right now, how many of us are US natives. And if any of you are on the call and you're not originally from the States, this will probably, you will see this. So in our culture, the US culture, small talk is really considered sort of a must do. I don't know what your experience has been. My experience has been now that we're wearing masks, I've noticed that we're a lot more times retreating behind masks and not engaging with people quite as much anymore. And you might actually, I mean, we're seeing some sort of costs associated with that, meaning that people just feel very disconnected from each other. So again, if you have a point of comparison, in American culture, small talk or just breaking the ice or randomly talking to people you don't know is very much a part of what we do. Okay, so I'm gonna skip over this because of the sake of time, but I'm gonna make this available to Pamela and you can pull this up. So Ellen, who always just has like the best monologues ever, she did a little monologue about small talk and just how we make this sometimes meaningless efforts. And Pamela, I'm gonna share that with you and then you can make that known to the rest of the group. But what's important to know, if you look at this whole map here, every country, every nation has a means by which we ask people stuff. So, you know, in the US, how's your day going? Or how are you? How's your day going? That's actually very unique to our culture. For any of you guys who've ever traveled before, you find that to be true, that you can always tell when we run into somebody and we say, you know, how are you? How's your day going? And someone will say, oh, you know, you're a Westerner. We can tell you're an American because that's definitely something that somebody in the US asks. Interestingly, we move over to certain parts of Asia. The question is, have you eaten? I can't imagine asking that here, but that's very typical there. In some of our other Middle Eastern or African nations, being peace unto you, that's a very common phrase to say. A way of making small talk is definitely a way that gets done. And then how's the weather? So then what's going on? If you look at some of these quotes here, you know, how was the night? That's an interesting phrase. I know in the South, I don't know if in the South of the US, a very common phrase is asking, you know, how did you eat? Did you eat well? And even that's kind of typical for the US. So every vernacular, every culture has its own way of making small talk. So again, even though it seems like it's a really American thing to do, we really are doing it just about everywhere. Okay, so you guys throw this out here so I can hear you. So do you think when it comes to small talk, the topic should be general or specific?
General.
Absolutely. So there's totally general. And so there's that. So light or serious, I think you get the gist of here. They're intended to be light. You know, there's nothing more kind of off-putting if you're in line at Starbucks and someone starts a very probing, deep conversation. And generally what will be our response to that? Our response will be to retreat, or like, oh my gosh, this is very awkward. They're asking me way too many questions. So the idea here is it's very, you know, it's light, it's very general, not terribly deep. The intention is for everyone to participate. I don't know if you guys have ever met people before where it really feels like their effort to start a conversation is more for them to talk about themselves. But I'm sort of that old adage, and actually I've stopped asking this question, not because I didn't care, but because I wanted to be genuine. You know, for instance, when we say something like, how are you? You know, if you're in line at Walmart or whatever else and you say, how are you? I remember asking a man one time how he was, and he said, actually, I'm really doing terrible, and went on to tell me all the ways that he was doing terrible. Now, it doesn't mean that that wasn't okay, because I asked him how he was, but sometimes we have to be very careful that the questions that we're probing, that we're asking, do we really have the time to answer them? So sometimes it's offering a statement instead of asking a question might be a little bit more appropriate. Okay, so let's talk about the who. So who do we complete small talk with? And this is a little bit of a rub. It's interesting. So when we're little kids, and I think this is why, you know, as you guys get a little older in high school and college, this whole idea of how to start more informal conversation with people feels a little foreign to you, because when you're young, you're told not to talk to strangers, right? I mean, that that's a means by which to protect you. So this is a learned activity. All right, so people use small talk for those who don't know each other very well at all. Obviously, you're not going to make small talk with people that you know super well, because you already know them and you can move on to more mature kind of conversations. They're only acquaintances, so they're maybe not people you're going to see terribly often. They could be office employees. So sometimes I'm running into the coffee center here in Harmon Hall, and there'll be a colleague, and I'll like, hey, so hey, good to see you today, which is actually what I say. Sometimes if I don't have time to ask somebody how they are, I'll say, hey, good to see you today, which is always true, of course. And then that way I'm not creating a situation to where someone feels like they have to answer me, or I'm not asking a question that maybe seems disingenuous if I'm not really willing to listen to them. So there's that. We have, you know, waitresses, hairdressers, customer service reps, things like that. My favorite thing to do when I'm in the line at Target or whatever else, I'll say, hey, how's your day going today? Which is actually apparently a very surprising thing to ask. But these are all the contexts in which we use small talk. All right, so this won't be too hard to say. What are we not going to make small talk about? All right, so you never ask things about what people make, or, you know, how's their recent breakup. Those are not appropriate conversations for people that you don't know very well, as well as generally when you're making small talk, you're in a pretty public forum. You're waiting in line, or you're waiting for a speaker to come, or you're sitting in church and you're, you know, just trying to acknowledge somebody in the pew. It's really not the time to ask for really personal information. And I've seen people do that sometimes, which is a little hard on people. So compliment. So the hard thing too is that we're in 2020 right now, and we're probably feeling like stuck on how do we make compliments around people that are not going to feel like inappropriate, right? So you never say, actually, the whole adage is that you generally don't make a comment about somebody, anything below the neck is generally kind of the rule of thumb here. So, you know, saying something like, oh, I love your hair, or that's a great hat. Sometimes what I do with, like, if there's a male coworker and I love his shirt, I might just say, oh, Dan, that's such a great color. I love that color. I mean, it seems strange, but I think we're just trying to be appropriate. So you're trying to provide a compliment to somebody, but not doing it in a way that's going to be, you know, off-putting to somebody. All right, obviously not anything involved in negative, not either about them or about somebody else. You probably, I mean, the funny thing is that small talk that goes awry is very often a huge part of movies. If anyone, have you ever seen Meet the Parents or things like that, you know, not sitting down at a meeting and there's a speaker and like, oh, I've heard this guy is super boring. And then you realize the person that you're talking to is actually their daughter or something to that effect. So you never share negative comments with the people who are in charge of an effort or of them or something, because again, you will run the risk of potentially offending someone. Obviously, this is the old adage of not talking about religion or politics. This is an interesting time. Of course, we have an election coming up in November, and talking about politics or making a joke about something like, oh, that sounds like something that so-and-so would say or whatever. You never really know what the orientation is of the person that you're with. And so just generally speaking, of course, not talking about religion or politics until you know people pretty well is a pretty good rule of thumb. All right, so why do we do this? So as you can appreciate, You sit down at a table, you're at an event, there's going to be a speaker. The speaker is not going to start their presentation for another 15 minutes, and you're sitting there at the table, and there's this uncomfortable silence, and there's no reason for it. Even if you are more of an introverted personality, there's nothing that should prevent you from engaging with somebody. Again, if you're unsure of what to say to somebody, just acknowledging them through eye contact or just saying hello. If you've had a bad day and you don't really have anything terribly useful to say, that's fine. But I think just to ignore people who are at a table with you because you're uncomfortable or nervous is not the best way to go. Obviously, we do it to fill time. This is a common reason why we do it. We very often make small talk to be polite. My own kids make fun of me a little. Well, they joke around with me a little bit this way because if I'm standing somewhere or standing in line, I don't like to have other people feel like they're not known or seen or noticed. And so sometimes I'll say, hey, good to see you today, or are we in the right place? Or I'll ask some kind of acknowledging question. But I guess my orientation to things is I feel like so often people are not paid attention to enough or acknowledged. And so I just like to be one of those people that doesn't do that. And then of course at the feedback, if I'll say, hey, good to see you today, and they're not terribly interested in engaging with me, I'm obviously not going to consider continuing having a full-blown conversation because, they're just not into it. All right, so the what part, okay? So as we talked about the beginning of this thing, weather is a very common topic. I don't know about you guys, I try to avoid weather unless it's a sort of a declaration. So today is a pretty amazing day. So saying something about, oh my gosh, what a beautiful day. Isn't this a great day? Or, it's so nice that we finally got some sunshine today. Something about that is fine. But actually, again, in our US culture, asking about weather is a very common small talk lead-in, good, bad, or otherwise. But I have a feeling that you guys can be a little bit more creative. Another thing that's generally safe to talk about is current events. However, I would go back and stipulate talking about the election as a small talk is setting you up for disaster. So, if there's something that happened, like if you are walking through the lobby of a hotel and you're there for an event, there's a television on and there's all the terrible fires that are happening on the West Coast. Well, talking something briefly about the fires on the West Coast is not a polarizing topic. I don't think there's anyone out there that wouldn't think that that's horrendous. We're losing, we're losing major resources, all those kinds of things. So making observations is not bad, but I would say generally speaking to avoid anything having to do with politics or the election coming up for sure. Sports news is very common. I'm not going to be good at this because I don't really know a lot about a lot of sports. And quite frankly, no one's really not in the stands of sports right now. Sometimes it's kind of funny to actually football is on, so that's been kind of exciting. In St. Louis, when the Blues were playing and we were doing really well, making some kind of a comment about that. But generally speaking, if you get into sports too deep, you're making an assumption that other people understand sports really well, and maybe they don't. Entertainment news is probably pretty safe too. If there's a big celebrity who's in town, making an observation about that could be okay as well. These are what I refer to as what I call polite noise. Actually, I didn't really have a name for it until I started doing this. There are statements that are what I call non-committal. And these are great because they don't actually require anyone to start engaging in conversation with you. It's just a quick observation, right? So, you can say good workout and they can smile at you. They can not say anything. If you're at the airport, like, wow, busy today. And then someone can decide how much they want to engage back with you. Busy day. I say that sometimes like, wow, it's really busy here today. Those are just sort of statements, and it helps make people feel like they're noticed without really requiring of them to provide a lot of engagement, because you just never know what you're walking into. Somebody could have, had a really hard day. They could have, maybe they're going to the coffee shop because someone very close to them was involved in a horrific car accident and they're extremely distracted. So sometimes small talk can be you know, not the most appropriate thing to provide. So I call these polite noises. They're just little phrases that you can throw out there that show someone that you recognize that they're also a human being. And again, they're very non-committal. Okay, this I have, and I borrowed this from somebody else because I love it. This is if you're going to take small talk to a little different level. So let's say if you're sitting at a networking event and it's not starting for another 20 minutes or something like that. So you have a little bit more time than making a general observation. There is this approach, it's called the R method. Of course, we have to have an acronym for everything. And essentially what this is involved is when you have an anchor, a reveal, and an encourage. And this is actually very, and people that I've observed that do a really nice job of small talk really manage this very well. Okay, so how this works. So, you know, when you walk into a venue, I'm going to assume that you guys are very observant. You know, I walked into a couple of my really good friends have opened up a new coffee shop on 2nd Street that you guys should totally go to if you want to. It's called La Belle Vie. It's down on 2nd Street in Frenchtown. And you walk in, it's got this very cool vibe. And they just opened yesterday and all this kind of stuff. So one of the best ways to become a very good small talker conversationalist is being very observant to what's happening around you. What are those shared experiences? So again, if I go into a coffee shop and there's somebody else in line, obviously our shared experience is that we want to support a new business. And secondly, that we're wanting something to eat or drink. Okay, so those are those common things. The best way to go about that is to generally be a very observant person. Okay, so, you know, walking in, like if I walked into, when I walked into my friend's place yesterday, I said, oh my gosh, this looks amazing. This looks great, doesn't it? It smells incredible, because it does. It smells like it's a great coffee shop. So the very first thing I do is I would maybe mention something that's shared, okay? So we're obviously in it together. And so the couple of examples that I have, if you walk into a new computer lab, which I don't think you really spend a lot of time doing, not because you're not great students, but I'm sure that you don't very often say, man, these new computers are awesome. All right, but oh, the beach is beautiful. These guys are incredible live. Because obviously you have this shared experience. You don't go to a concert without having shared that. Like, oh, I've heard these guys do such a great job. So the very first thing that you would say is pointing out what is that shared reality between you and the person that you're making small talk with. All right, then there's a reveal. Okay, and again, you want to be very careful with this one. So, you know, what I did was with every sample question that I had. So this first one was, wow, there's a lot of computers in here. And so the reveal might be something where I say something about my own experience or my own situation that relates to the anchor statement. So I would say, gosh, I was having so many problems with my old PC, or I try to come here every summer. Again, safe ones. So you don't want to say something like, you know, I used to go to XYZ company. They were terrible. I had such bad customer service, because again, you don't know what that's going to mean to somebody else. And generally speaking, people are very put off by negative comments or criticisms of others. Okay. So when you open up a little bit more, you know, then you have a few more threads of connection and trust that you're developing. And then the last thing, so you do the, you have the reveal aspect and then the encourage. Okay, then something about your shared, you know, your shared reality. How do you like the new one? Is this your first time visiting? Did you have any trouble getting a ticket? And so an example of how these things can all get pulled together is, the example was the computer said, man, these new computers are great. I was really having a lot of problems with my old PC. You know, how do you like your new one? You know, obviously if they're showing something that they have in their hand, asking somebody what I like to do, you know, if I'm in a coffee shop and I'm like, man, this place looks great. I'm really looking to try something new. I've heard good things about this place. And the last thing could be, what do you get? What do you recommend? What's your favorite thing to order here? And people love that because it's a pretty safe statement. And, you know, I generally find that people like to talk about themselves and things that are of interest to them. All right, I'm going to go through a couple more of these things and I'm going to close this out so you guys can ask lots of questions and we can do this. There, of course, are the difference between open and closed questions, and this is very obvious. So the open questions, the nice thing about asking people open questions is that they have some more control over the conversation. So my husband was a federal agent, so he was an FBI agent, which sounds more exciting than he would probably say it actually is. These guys and gals are the queens and kings of open-ended questions. And he would tell you there's this thing called a read technique. And again, when we're having small talk with people, our intention is not to investigate them. But any investigator would tell you that you avoid closed questions, okay? You want to give the person that you're interviewing as much control over the situation as possible. Otherwise, they feel very trapped. They feel like they are the subject of the interview as opposed to this. So asking people open-ended questions for small talk is a really good idea. So I have this infographic here, okay? So, do you know, or did you try it, or was it good? Those are questions that are only going to elicit a yes or no answer. So if I ask more open questions like, have you been there? What was it like? And that gives the person, and that person can decide whether they want to answer it as a 1-word or 2-word answer. But generally speaking, open-ended things. And this is how then you also find those 6 degrees of separation. You realize that the person you're talking to has a son that you used to go to high school with, that played softball with you, or soccer, or whatever else. And so that's the only way that you're going to find those things. Okay. So another way, this is great. Any of you guys who have had any counseling training or counseling background, if you were a social work major, you will very often hear this phraseology is tell me about. So if you have a friend who's starting to tell you, say something, oh my gosh, this is really going wrong. Tell me about that. What's going on there? Tell me about it. It's a really good way of opening something up in a way that's not judgmental and allows that person to, it evokes and it provides them with the opportunity to decide with what they want to share with you. Tell me about your experience with her is better than, man, I heard she was totally a jerk. What did you not like about her? Okay, that's not the right kind of question to ask. If you say, tell me about that, then you're not judging that, and you're allowing that person to decide how much they want to tell you about a subject at a time. Okay, so I'm gonna go through some top 10s. Genuinely interested in people. This is so important. There's no gains in small talk if you really don't care about other people. Otherwise, all it really is small talking at people, not small talking with. And I, as I mentioned to you guys a little while ago, I know people that way where it's just, they're looking for an excuse to say something. They really don't have any interest in hearing back from other people. So practice being somebody who is genuinely interested in other people. Who are they? What's on their mind? What's their experience? What do they feel like sharing? Okay, focusing on the positive. Always go for the positive topics. I've been in events before where I'm not having a very good experience, not very happy, not in a good frame of mind, but you never know who it is that you're meeting. Could end up being a prospective employer, could be somebody that you need to have a good relationship with in the future. And if you start off excuse me, expressing something negative, you're going to probably burn that bridge. Again, conversing, not debating. I've been at things where I will, I was in line at a store and somebody said, oh, that, this particular line reminded them of, our U.S. economy or something like that. That's just going to kind of disarm me a little bit. And so you can just make it light. If you don't know somebody really well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to get into a full-blown debate about something that you're very passionate about. There could be obviously exceptions. I mean, if someone is being offensive towards somebody because of their race or ethnicity, I think you maybe do have an obligation to say something, because if that's what you were trained to do, I mean, that's a good opportunity to do that. But generally speaking, it's light, right? We're just looking to have a fun, enjoyable exchange, not really dig deep into really deep-seated issues. You want to respect people's point of view. I was always raised to believe that everybody has a story. So you don't know why they're approaching something the way that they are, why they're so irritable, why they're being negative or angry. You just don't know the thing behind the thing. And so always give someone the benefit of the doubt when you're having some conversation. You want to give that person a way to look good. And so that's important, which just sounds like a hard thing to do. But if someone were to say, you know, let's say you're having some light conversation with somebody and they say that, you know, and they say, well, yeah, I really need to be here because I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I mean, saying something light and saying, oh gosh, I'm sure that probably is not actually true, or I'm sure that you have lots of talents, this is just one of them. Something that obviously helps that person save face and look good in the possible light is a really important thing. And again, these commonalities and differences. Okay, so 50-50 sharing, a great conversation involves reciprocity, give and take. There could be some instances in which there might be a little bit less so, like if somebody has experienced trauma or somebody's going through something really hard, you know, that balance might be a little bit less this way. But generally speaking, it's a good idea to make sure that there's active 50-50 give and take with somebody. Asking purposeful questions is important, especially the longer you're having a conversation with them, for sure. Okay, so what I want to find out from you, and I'm gonna minimize the screen so that I can see your questions. So I'm gonna do the stop share thing. So I'm gonna ask you guys so I can see you. Okay, and I don't see any chats yet. So let's say, and you guys decide, if you were to meet, so maybe someone started out, if you were to meet your very favorite celebrity tomorrow, let's say you, wouldn't that be amazing? You can choose who this is. You're walking out to your car outside of Harmon Hall, because that's where I work, that's where I am right now. And I'll be darned if you didn't run into your favorite celebrity in the parking lot. You guys decide who it is. Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, some athlete, I don't know. Okay, and by the time you recompose yourself, because you realize that you're freaking out because you're seeing the celebrity in front of Harmon Hall, what would you be inclined to say to them so that you wouldn't look super foolish? Anyone want to give an example?
So like a lot of the celebrities I like have podcasts, so I might like mention that I like their podcast or something.
That is awesome. So that's a really good idea. So what Emerald did there is she figured out what was the common ground. Because, you know, if you just approach someone and said, oh my gosh, I love you, the most amazing celebrity ever, that would be a little off-putting, wouldn't it? But if you said, you know, I've listened to your podcast, which is really, really good, which actually leads me to also say that when you guys start interviewing for jobs or talking to folks, you know, finding out a little bit about them first is a really good idea. So Emerald, that's an excellent idea. Some of you guys and gals might be going through recruitment, you know, for sorority or fraternity. I don't remember what the timing is for those things, but that is like small talk on steroids, isn't it? You're having to very quickly make conversation with people you don't know. I don't know if recruitment's being done through Zoom. I know my daughter both of my girls are in college and go to pretty big schools where they did recruitment. They did recruitment all through Zoom. So that puts it at like next level, okay? Somebody mentioned here, yes, what they're doing at Lindenwood, absolutely. So if that's obviously your common factor, you're here because you have that in common, all right? So what are you doing here at Lindenwood? And that could be, you know, in a couple of cases. And so like I love on the first day of classes when students actually start talking to each other, which I found is actually not as common as I would love to have seen done. And of course, now people are now being really careful about social distancing and things like that. But let me put that out there. Let's say if you walked into a classroom on your first day, so we can do this over again, even though we're into the 4th week here, and you sat down and you know that awkward silence because you're waiting for people like me to show up into the classroom and you've got your peers sitting around you. And I'm often surprised how very often a student will go the whole semester and not know the names of anyone around them, which makes me sad sometimes. But let's say if you sit down at a table, first day of class, you guys decide what the class is, and there's someone sitting next to you. What's an example of small talk that you guys do as Lindenwood students with each other?
You ask them what their major is.
Absolutely. That's always a safe bet, right? So what's your major? Because everyone can answer that one. That's an easy win, isn't it? Anything else? What else would you ask? There's tons of options here.
I feel like my question's always, what's your major? What year are you? Where are you from?
Okay, that's good. And that's things that are pretty common, you know, that almost anyone can ask. What else? Are there kind of like
someone in the chat put if they are in any sports.
Okay, absolutely. So if you're in any sports, then people can say no. So some polite noise things that you could do. You know, I've heard students say things like, you know, they walk into a room and they'll say, you know, shoot, I'm so glad, you know, I didn't think I was going to find this classroom. That doesn't require anyone to answer it. Because if anyone's been in Harmony Hall, you know that the way that we've done our, well, I had nothing to do with it. The way the classrooms are numbered here makes no sense at all. So there's that, right? So trying to find it and, oh, you know, I was concerned I wasn't going to find a parking spot or whatever else. So some of those polite noise things are really very, really very helpful. And I love that. I've had a couple students, I very often encourage this. I love it when students don't sit in the same spot every time. One thing is because it actually helps me learn their names faster, which is not anything that any of you are terribly interested in. But I love that when students do that because that shows that they have a really genuine interest in learning about somebody else. Okay, and that's how friendships are developed, which is great. Okay, I want to open it up to you guys. You can either type, and I'll pay attention to this chat box too. I know Pamela's doing that as well. What about small, like what's a faux pas or what do you feel stuck on? Let's talk about anything that we can do to help you be a little bit more comfortable with small talk. I'll throw that out there.
Maybe like what to do when the conversation stalls, like if you've already like asked something that was a bit of a faux pas and then like you don't know how to like get
Right.
up from that,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Okay, so you're talking to someone who has very often put their foot in their mouth. That would be myself, just so we're clear here. And if you need any testimony of that, I have a 21-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 17-year-old who will tell you that their mom does this. So I will do things like I will approach somebody who I think I recognize and then find out that's not the person. So one thing that you need to do that I've done with that is not take yourself too seriously. I mean, what is the harm? Okay, so let me give you an example. Have you ever had anyone approaching you or you feel like they're approaching you and they wave, okay? Then you realize that they're not waving at you, they're waving at the person behind you, okay? So what? What is the harm done in waving back, okay? I mean, maybe, you know, maybe because I'm older than you, like if somebody were to wave and I waved and they were waving behind, I would just make light of it. I'd say, oh, you know, oh shoot, you're waving the person behind you. Okay, well, whatever, have a great day. It was nice seeing you. I mean, just don't make a big deal about it. I mean, sometimes just not taking yourself too seriously. My favorite one, you know, like if you trip, right? So what do we do when we trip? We like look at the ground because certainly something really horrendous must have popped up out of the ground all of a sudden. So you trip, right? You just make it light. You're like, well, shoot, didn't see that happening or something like that. We very often take ourselves too seriously. Just make it fun. All right. So, and then getting back to Emerald, kind of what you said, if things have run their course, and that does happen, you know, a couple of things that you can do. One thing I'll say is I'm like, well, you know, it is nice talking to you. And people generally know that that means we're tapering things off now. You know, if a speaker is getting ready to go, because I've had that happen before, I'm sitting there and I'm engaged in conversation with somebody and then the presenter is trying to get started and the person is still talking, you know, and that's getting to be rude. So I'll just sort of like, you know, say, hey, and I'll lower my voice to show that I'm trying to be quiet. And I'll say, hey, it was nice talking to you. I hope you have a great day. Hope you enjoy the conference, whatever else is going on. So there's that. If you're ever at an event where you're standing and you're trying to get out of something, don't lie. Just say the same thing. Just say, you know, hey, it was great talking to you. You know, I need to head over here for a little while, but again, it was so great to meet you and nice talking with you. And that's generally a pretty polite way of ending it. So again, not lying, because, you know, people saying, oh, you know, I need to go find the bathroom. And then you see them 3 minutes later, they're not finding the bathroom. That makes people feel like, you know, that they weren't important enough to you to just end the conversation. Okay, good question. Any other things you want to share or questions you want to ask? I'm here for it.
I'd like to say one thing that I just came across, just honestly, just searching through like Twitter, was they were saying when it comes to making like the first approach, or even like I'd say initiating a conversation or small talk, that it was, you know, everybody's afraid of making that first initial connection. So even like I've even been there where I'm like, oh crud, what do I say? But I got to remember that we're all human, and guarantee we're all going to have that little bit of anxiety of, you know, I hope I say the right thing first.
Yeah, Jay, I totally agree with you. And again, if you don't know what questions to start asking with somebody, again, go back to those polite noise things that I was talking about. Just make an appropriate, you know, not critical observation. And even just being funny, like I've gone up to get, let's say if I want to get a bottle of water and all of a sudden they're all gone, and I'll say something like, oh, well, you know, shoot, I guess I'll have to come back later. Some things that doesn't require any engagement from somebody else. You know, we wait in line, right? If we're waiting in line at Starbucks or whatever else, very often our natural inclination is to do what? To get on our phone, to fill the space and time. But I don't know if you guys were aware of this, but there's this research that's being done right now that as a consequence of COVID and of our social distancing and our isolation, the preponderance or the rate of depression is rising. And this is probably not shocking to you guys at all. That we really is, because we're human, we need to have interaction with others. And I know that not everyone who's with us today you don't have to be an extrovert to do that. I know we feel like, well, that's not how I roll. But I think we just need to, especially in this day and time with wearing masks and trying to be, you know, respectful about being away from people, understandably, is, Jay, kind of what you're alluding to, is that we kind of need to up our game at noticing other people, just acknowledging. So it shouldn't be that because we're wearing a mask now that we just ignore people, okay? And we're gonna probably be wearing masks for a while, sadly. So engaging people, you know, at first we were so self-conscious about, you know, masks, and I was like, we're all wearing them, so what's the big deal? So, you know, just like actually looking at people, making a conscious effort when you go to Quick Trip or you go to whatever, that you are looking people in the eye. When you walk into a building, you know, on campus, put your phone away, because first of all, you might fall, and then you got to get back to that strategy I told you before about just making light of yourself falling. And just make a concerted effort to just look people in the eye. Now, here's the funny thing, and actually you guys might have some tips on this. It's really hard to smile when you're wearing a mask. Although I've noticed that when you're still smiling, your eyes still are doing something, okay? I'm not suggesting this is the best strategy. I've noticed I started blinking at people more. I don't know what's up with that. It's like, what's left of me here? I got this to work with here. So I'll blink at people, which is, I know, a little odd. But again, we can just, you can nod at people, but just looking at people in the eye right now, I think is very important. I'm concerned about, again, with this social distancing, that we're going to lose a lot of the importance of engaging in being intentional and just noticing other people. So Jay, your point's a good one. You know, we get so hanked up, we think somebody else is just going to be better at it. We're all just trying to find our way. So thanks for sharing that.
I've noticed a lot of the times I end up doing that, like, whenever I like unintentionally make eye contact with someone and it's kind of awkward, I tend to just like do like a little bit of a smile to just kind of as an attempt to kind of just brush it off, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, but then I've been realizing, like, with a mask on, that doesn't work. So like I might just like try to get in the habit of just like doing it like a small wave or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's totally fine. And I've heard people just say like, hey, you know, like just in a positive way, like, hi. I mean, what's the harm in saying hi, right? So you can just do that. Obviously we can't, you know, we have to be very careful about, you know, like touching people. You know, sometimes we'll say hi and we kind of touch people on the arm. That this is probably not the best time to be doing things like that. But I think just nodding, you know, just saying, you know, hi, I don't think there's any harm in doing that. And quite frankly, like the example that I gave you, you know, if you are looking at somebody because you think you recognize them and they end up not being the person you thought they are, there's no harm in just saying, oh, you know, I'm sorry, you look so much like somebody I thought I knew. Just, it's not a big deal, right? I've had it happen before. They'll say, someone will be staring at me and I'm like, oh, this is kind of a little uncomfortable. And they'll say, oh gosh, you know, I'm sorry, I thought you were somebody else. I apologize. And there's no harm in that, right? There's no stalker thing going on with that. Just acknowledge the obvious and move on.
I'd like to get your opinion. I know in my experience, whenever I am interviewing for jobs, sometimes you come in and there's a receptionist and they'll say, oh, I'm here for my interview at 10 o'clock. You know, they say, okay, yeah, wait here. Would you like water, anything? And then you're just kind of sitting there. Or if you go into a conference room and people kind of start trickling in, but you're waiting for everyone else, you know, I always kind of panic in those moments. Like, you know, do I make small talk in those moments? Do I just wait until the interview starts? You know, I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but I kind of never know what to do in those situations.
Okay. Well, I have a couple of ideas, but let's hear from somebody else who's been in that situation. What have you, when you've had stall time, you're waiting for an interview and are you sitting in a waiting area? Pamela, is that what you're referring to mostly?
Yeah, sometimes, if there's like a receptionist or if, you know, there's a meeting with multiple people and they're obviously here to interview you, you know, what do you do?
Okay, I have a couple of thoughts, but how about anybody else? What has worked well for anyone else who's on this call today?
In my experience, you should definitely talk to them because your interviewers are probably going to ask the receptionist how you were.
So Christina, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm going to give you a quick story. So I used to be in charge of stuff and people and things like that. And one thing that I did was exactly what you said. So I've been a director of nonprofit organizations where social interactions and human interactions is really, really important. So if someone isn't going to treat my receptionist very well or value them, I want to know that, because then that shows me that they're not their authentic self. So I'll give you an example, and I know none of you guys on this call today would do this, but I was interviewing for a position and a candidate came in and said, oh, hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm here for my interview, and that, like you said, Pamela, and went and sat down. Well, this gal so minimized or underestimated the receptionist that she pulled out her phone and she called her boyfriend and she said, oh, yeah, I'm waiting for this interview. Like, I know I'm gonna get it. Like, this is so easy. I don't even know why I'm doing this. And just completely discounted this receptionist, okay? And I was so glad to have known that, because when this gal came in, we interviewed her, she knocked it out of the park. I mean, when it came to stuff that she had rehearsed, she was a rock star. So quite frankly, had I not known this about her, we very well could have you know, have offered her a job and then not have seen her real self. So Pamela, here's what happens. And I'm gonna assume that in a job interview situation, or you were waiting in the receptionist area, our inclination would be to pull out our phone. Totally get that. Now, it's been a long time since I've interviewed for jobs. I've been here for 14 years and I love it. So I'm not going anywhere unless somebody has a different idea for me. So I haven't had to deal with this in a while. There is nothing wrong with just being still. Okay? Just sitting there and allowing yourself. Have you guys ever done this? Like this morning, my mind was so busy. I came to work this morning and I didn't have the radio on. I didn't do a podcast this morning. I didn't put my Spotify playlist on. I just turned the radio off and allowed my brain to be still. And I've been more productive today than I've been in a few days. And I think that was why. So in that situation, it would be very tempting to take out your phone, Do not do it. All right. Just allow yourself to be still and let your thoughts just take in the, I'm looking around my office right now, just take in the atmosphere. If you need to use a restroom, no harm in asking somebody if you can do that. If they offer you water, absolutely take it. You might need it so that you're not, choking on your interview. But just allow yourself to have a little bit of downtime to just become relaxed and familiar with your environment. And if you need to practice with that, what I would do is the next time you guys go to a doctor's appointment, like a dental appointment or doctor's appointment, and you're sitting in the waiting room, and your temptation, right, is to take out your phone, try it. Try sitting there with no media. Just observing the waiting room, observing people, because that gives you things to talk about when you're making some observations that way. So that's a great thought, Pamela. Thanks for sharing that.
I just had a slight question and then just suggestions based off of my question.
Okay.
I have ADHD, so being still and just taking in things is kind of difficult for me.
Yeah.
So I've been fidgeting this whole time with Play-Doh.
Yeah, that's all right.
But I was wondering what kind of fidgeting would be kind of acceptable, or having just a pen and a pad of paper to write down things as they pop into your head, so it's not staying in your head and disrupting your own thought process, essentially.
Oh my gosh, I love this question so much. So I've had students who come to class with different things to use, and I think that's awesome. I do not care. Whatever it takes to get you through is awesome. Now, to your point, Emerald, if you're in a job interview, bringing your Play-Doh with you is probably not gonna work. I'm not judging, I'm just saying. So what I would do if you anticipate fidgeting, because what's gonna happen? You're gonna start doing this with your leg. You can't see what I'm doing right now. You're gonna start, and that's gonna be very distracting, and that's gonna be all that interviewer can do. So you actually answered your own question. I would bring something to do with you, not Play-Doh. I would bring a notepad, which actually is a really smart idea to bring to an interview anyway. And then you can start taking notes. You're taking notes, you're asking them questions, and you're writing things down. I wouldn't be an active doodler, because that shows that maybe that you're bored. But another thing that I would do is I would sit on the edge. Okay, I'm gonna do this right now in my chair. I would sit on the edge of your chair. Okay, so your posture is more attentive, and it's less likely for you to start doing these fidgety things when you're sitting on the edge of your chair and you're leaning forward. Boy, this looks terrible on the screen here. And I lean forward, because if I lean forward, I'm showing that I am engaged with you and I'm attentive. And when I'm doing that, I might be more inclined to rest my arms a little bit on my leg, and then I'm not doing all these fidgety things that I might do otherwise. What do you think about that?
That sounds really helpful. I was partially asking because I have several different fidgets to kind of help me get through various situations,
Yeah.
because sometimes you don't want one that makes noise, or is too visually distracting for other people. So I was just kind of wondering what your thoughts were on what would be appropriate, because I do also have a few spinner rings, which are really easy to just you just have it on your finger and very subtly play with it.
Yeah.
And it helps.
Yeah.
So if anyone else needs that information, just let me know.
That is so good. So I would say, it's I got my wedding ring on right here. So let's say if I find a safe spot, but just going like this with my ring, I would do that, because no one can really see me doing it. It's not like I'm doing this. That's a whole nother level of fidgeting, right? So I would say, you got to figure out what works for you. And Emerald, in your case, I would practice. I would rehearse with somebody. And honestly, you could do that with me. I know you don't know me very well until today, but if you ever wanted to do a practice interview, any of you guys, if you ever want to do that, where you just sort of practice, I do this all the time with my majors, and we just find, come in my office and we just do that to give you some safe ideas. I would say, universally speaking, the idea that we had about writing, just taking notes, that's actually a pretty responsible, active participation to take during an interview anyway. So if you're writing notes, maybe that would give you something to do. What I would encourage you not to do not bring a pen that has a clicker. Because what do people do in that case? And they're going to start doing that. And that drives me nuts when people do that, clicking their pen. So, you know, taking a pen that doesn't have anything on it that's going to create any distractions for you. So Emerald, those were great suggestions and a good question. But again, take me up on that. If you guys want to practice interviewing, ever, just send me.
I would love to do it.
No, for real. I would do it.
I was just gonna give a bit of advice to anyone who like clicks their pen or taps their pencil. A thing I've done like as long as I can remember, and part of why like people didn't really notice I was ADHD for a long time is I just tap my thumb against my pen against my thumb occasionally, and it so then like the fidget, like it creates a sound that's enough for my brain to focus on, but it's not really something other people could hear. And also just throwing this out there that if anyone, regardless of whether or not you have ADHD or autism or anything else, like if you want just to know about a variety of fidgets, just let me know, because I fell down a rabbit hole on the internet. So I found a lot.
She is your fidget go-to person. All right. So the offer that I'm having on the table, so my email is easy, jturner@lindenwood.edu, jturner@lindenwood.edu. If you guys want to do a couple of things, you want to do a practice interview with me, you need to give me a little heads up because I don't know how this whole distancing thing is working. It's driving me crazy. And a couple of things we can do, a practice interview, and then also I can give you some very practical tips based on if you're in an interview, I can say, okay, listen, if you were to come in here in my office and interview with me, here's a couple of very appropriate small talk conversations that we could have. And I can show you like the stuff in my office that would be very appropriate for you to start some conversation about. And I got a lot of stuff hanging on my wall, so there's a lot to work with here for sure. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes.
When you're like, I mean, you started a small talk and then it got silent. So what do you do? Like, do you still like talk with the person or I don't know, it's like an awkward moment and I don't really know what to do there.
So I'm pretty chatty. I'm sure you figured that out. So I have to take solace in the pregnant pauses. So my natural inclination is to start filling up space with talk because I'm nervous. Well, that's not always very respectful to the other person. Also, if I don't stop talking and provide pauses, I might run into the error of saying something inappropriate. It doesn't happen very often, but I might because I might start getting nervous, I might start saying something that's weird. There is nothing wrong with just being quiet and being still. And I know it's very countercultural. And again, what you can do is when you stop talking, a couple things, a pregnant pause is what we call it. You can just, smile and you can say, and then if you think it's going to be extended, like I said earlier, you can say, man, it was so great talking to you. And then you can move along, or you can say it with a different tone. It's like, gosh, it was so great talking to you, to affirm that person, but it also just gives you a chance for that conversation to come to a close. Anyone else that was a really good question. So the question was, how do you deal with silence? Any other ideas that anyone has? Like the silence we have right now. And it's okay. Actually, Zoom has been an interesting training for me around just being quiet, right? Because it's easy, or when we're not around each other, it's easier to disengage with technology, which is a downside. But again, my advice would be to not fear quiet, to just let it settle in.
I also think with quiet is that it's allowing the other person to start the conversation too. Like, you don't have to be the only person talking the entire time.
Exactly. Love that. So I know we're about out of time. I want to reiterate one more time. I did not say it just to be polite. I would be more than happy to be, if you want to practice either phone interview, because naturally you can't make a lot of observations from the phone. Because I know a lot of you guys, your first interview with an employer will probably be phone, won't it? Okay, so if you either want to practice a phone interview, a Zoom interview, because I see students when it comes to Zoom interviews, you got to get rid of things that are fun posters to you, but like your marijuana, like none of you I'm sure would have this, but I have a graduate student and we do videos and there's a paraphernalia in the background. Are you with me? Okay. So probably not something that he wants me to see, or, that would be the most appropriate thing. So if you want to practice a Zoom interview, an in-person interview, or a phone interview, if you just email me, jturner@lindenwood.edu, either now or in the future, we will set that up. We'll make it happen. Okay?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to say thank you as well to everybody for spending some time with us this afternoon. Like I said, if this is your first time coming, or that you've gone to the virtual leadership series before, we do have these going on every other week. And I did send in the chat the link to the post test, like I mentioned at the beginning. If you don't mind just filling that out, that information is really helpful for me. And I can share that link again, and I'll share the presentation that Dr. Turner had for us today as well.
Oh, it says there's no link in the chat.
I think, if you joined later, then it might not be in there, but I will put that in there right now.
Thank you, everybody, for your time.
There you go.
There it is. I see it too.
Yeah, I think if you joined later, I don't think you get the full chat. I think you just see like where you joined in the chat. But that should be on there, and I can email that to everybody as well afterwards.
Okay. Well, I'm all done, and I gave you guys some next things that you guys can consider doing. And I look forward to hopefully meeting some of you in person. That'd be great. I would love it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Turner. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
There's a white kind of grass right now.